Summary of Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov. The novel Pale Fire presented as a scholarly edition of John Shade's last poem, Pale Fire. This means that the book is made up of the poem itself, along with a foreword, commentary, and index written by Professor Charles Kinbote, Shade's co-worker and neighbor. Kinbote's job as the poem's editor is to help readers understand Shade's poem by giving analysis and background. He fails hilariously at this task because most of his commentary is made up of unrelated stories about King Charles the Beloved, the deposed king of Kinbote's home country of Zembla. There are, in a way, two plots in Pale Fire. The apparent plot is what Kinbote, who is crazy, tells readers happened, and the true plot is what really happened, though it takes a lot of careful reading to figure out. Kinbote tells his readers that he and Shade are close friends and neighbors in the college town of New Y. This is what the novel's apparent plot is all about. Kinbote and Shade walk together every night, and Kinbote tells Shade real stories about King Charles of Zembla's rule, the revolution that got rid of him, and his brave escape from Zembla. Kinbote thinks that Shade is working on a poem that will take these stories about Charles the Beloved and make them all about Zembla. As Kinbote talks more about King Charles, it becomes clear that Kinbote thinks he is King Charles. He is just pretending to be Charles Kinbote, a Zemblan professor at Wordsmith College, to avoid the extreme Zemblan killer Gratus who is after him. Kinbote asks Shade to dinner on the day that he finishes his song. Gratus shows up on Kinbote's door, pulls out a gun, and kills Shade while trying to kill Kinbote, who he knows to be King Charles. Shade and Kinbote are crossing the street. Unfortunately, Sybil, Shade's evil and sneaky widow, lets Kinbote change Shade's last poem out of grief. But when Kinbote reads it, he is heartbroken to discover that it's not about Zembla, but about Shade's family, the natural world, and his fixation on the idea that consciousness can live on after death. Still, when Kinbote reads the poem again, he realizes that Shade has cleverly added many references to Zembla and to Kinbote's stories about King Charles. Shade has even predicted the arrival of Gratus, Kinbote's killer, which is amazing since Shade had no knowledge of the man until the moment he died. Kinbote says that Sybil's bad impact is to blame for the fact that Zembla isn't drawn out as much in Pale Fire, and he spends his commentary on the poem explaining how the poem is really about Zembla. This is not at all what happened, of course. Kinbote is a crazy narcissist, and you can't trust what he says. Actually, his real name isn't Kinbote, the person telling the story is Professor V. Botkin, who thinks he is the banished king of Zembla living as Charles Kinbote. A careful reader can put together Nabokov's hints to figure out the real story of the book, which is as follows. V. Botkin is a language teacher at Wordsmith College who was born in Russia. People who work with him don't like him because he's rude, weird, thin-skinned, self-centered, gay, and a pedophile. Plus, he's mentally insane and can't control his delusions and hallucinations. Botkin rents a house from Judge Goldsworth, a local judge who has a bad reputation for being too harsh. John and Sybil Shade live across the street from Botkin's house. Botkin really likes Shade's poetry, but he's very lonely and mentally getting worse, so he becomes obsessed with the idea that if he tells Shade stories about his home country of Zembla, which is not a real place, it's part of Botkin's delusion, Shade will use those stories in a great poem. Botkin keeps trying to get Shade's attention because he thinks they are close friends. When he does, he talks about Zembla and King Charles without asking Shade anything important about himself or his life. Shade finds Botkin annoying and even offensive sometimes, but he puts up with his friend out of kindness because he knows Botkin is sad and lonely. Botkin talks about King Charles in the third person to hide the truth, which he thinks is true. He is King Charles and lives in New Y as a fake. Shade knows that Botkin thinks this, but he acts like these crazy ideas are real, maybe because he wants to be nice. Shade is working on a poem all through July, but he won't be more detailed about it with Botkin. Botkin keeps spying on Shade because he is sure that the song is about Zembla and can't hold back his excitement. He hangs around outside his house and sometimes sneaks in through the back door without being asked. At the same time, his mental health gets worse. On the day that Shade finishes his poem, Botkin has a dream that Shade is standing behind him and telling him to come over that night. Botkin does go to Shade's house that night and finds Shade quietly crying while carrying the final copy of Pale Fire. Shade agrees to do something fun with Botkin and have wine with him. Botkin then grabs the text, supposedly to help Shade cross the street safely. Someone from outside Botkin's house shows up and shoots a gun at Shade, killing him right away. When the cops show up, the killer tells them the truth. His name is Jack Gray and he escaped from a prison for the criminally insane. Judge Goldsworth, who owns Botkin's house, gave him the sentence, so he hitched a ride to New Y to kill him. As we already said, Shade looks a lot like Judge Goldsworth, so Gray thought Shade was the judge. Botkin thinks this story is just a cover story to hide the fact that an assassin was very close to killing a past king, which is bad for politics. Even though Shade has died, Botkin gets Sybil to sign a contract that gives him full power over the publication of Pale Fire. But Sybil and the other English teachers at Wordsmith quickly realize this is a bad idea. Botkin is crazy and doesn't even know anything about literature. He teaches in a foreign language department. Unfortunately, it's too late. Botkin leaves New Y for a house in the middle of nowhere in the West, where he stays to write his commentary on Pale Fire. Nabokov indicates that Botkin ends his own life after finishing.
About the author. Vladimir Nabokov was born into a rich Russian noble family as the first of 5 children. Nabokov had a great childhood on the farm his family owned in St. Petersburg. He loved reading and writing from a very young age. When Nabokov was only 17, his first book of poems came out. It was called Sticky Poems. Because of the Russian Revolution in 1917, Nabokov and his family had to leave Russia for Crimea. His father was a well-known leader of Russia's Constitutional Democratic Party. No one thought the change would last long, and the family thought they would be able to go back to Russia. But by 1919, the whole Nabokov family was forced to leave Russia and live in Europe. Nabokov moved to England and then to Trinity College, University of Cambridge, to study language and biology. When he took tests, Nabokov always scored at the top of his class, and he graduated with a BA in 1922. He went to Berlin after college, while the rest of his family was sent away. Nabokov lived in Berlin for a while and became a well-known author there. He married Vera Evseyevna Slonim in 1925, and their only child, Dmitry, was born in 1934. In 1937, Nabokov went to France with his young family. But because of World War II, they had to move back to the United States in 1940. The Nabokovs first moved to New York City, but in 1941, Nabokov took a job teaching at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. That same year, Nabokov released The Real Life of Sebastian Knight, his first book in English. He later became a citizen of the United States in 1945. Nabokov was the director of Lepidoptery at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology. He was a lepidopterist, which means he knew a lot about moths and butterflies. From 1948 to 1959, he taught Russian and European literature at Cornell University in New York. Nabokov quit teaching after Lolita came out in 1955 because it was so well received and made him enough money. In 1961, he moved to Montreux, Switzerland, and started writing full-time. While he was in Switzerland, Nabokov wrote a number of novels, non-fiction books, and poems collections. These included Pale Fire, 1962, Speak, Memory, and Autobiography Revisited, 1967, and Carousel, 1987, which came out after he had died. He died in 1977, when he was 78 years old. Most people agree that Nabokov is one of the best English prose writers, and a lot of reviewers and scholars think that both Pale Fire and Lolita are the best novels ever.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.